Good. I do want to remind everybody too, he talked a little bit about what county roads and where they're listed and on where they're closed. If you want to find out where state highways are still closed, you go to sd511.org, and that lists all the state highways that are closed as well. So if you have people that are wondering what's been opened and what might not be available to them yet, that's a good resource for you to have, sd511.org. So with that, we're going to go to Secretary Perry with the Department of Public Safety. Has his umbrella of what he covers is all law enforcement, all wildland fire. He also has Office of Emergency Management, and he'll talk a little bit about some of the supporting actions that their office has been taking.
Thank you, Governor. So as the Governor said, we have the Office of Emergency Management within DPS. Our main role in situations like these is to support your local county emergency manager. Your emergency manager had a plan, he put it in action, and that's why you're, to the extent you can be, you're doing pretty well for the situation you're in. So I think you should all be grateful to Paul for having that plan well established. Not everybody has those. Even sometimes when they have them, they're perfunctory, and that's not what we want. We want to practice, want to train. They do a great job, and that's something we do in the background. We support that. We help them put those plans together. We help with the training. And if the situation gets dire enough, we have something called an IMAT team, an Incident Management Assistant Team. And didn't need to bring it here, but we did send it to Union County down in Dakota Dunes. So it was vital. They needed it. And what they do is they support logistically and operationally and help the local county emergency managers coordinate. So that's what we put in place during this event. Like I said, there's a lot of training behind the scenes, and it's great, whether it be EMS or emergency management or the police, that they get out there and practice this, and your team does, and we're grateful that things went as well as they did because of that. One thing I'd like to say in addition is, remember, receding water is still dangerous. You know, when you're going out there to clean up or whatever it is, it's still dangerous. It's muddy, it's mucky. Some of it's still moving pretty quick. Be very careful. It's hot out. Drink some water. When you're cleaning up your yard or your basement or whatever it is, sometimes there's more injury after the fact than during the fact because people are so focused on getting things back to normal. So take your time, be healthy, drink water. I sound like a nurse now, but that's what I have. Thank you.
Well, I think the one thing that's good to remember is there's still a lot of debris in this river, and a lot of debris coming down. So if you see people, the sun is shining and they want to get back out on the river or get back up on the lake, there's a lot of debris coming down. That's been the force of that, and the Niobrara doesn't have a gauge on it. It is an uncontrolled river that dumped a lot of, and really overflooded, dumped a lot of debris into Lewis and Clark Lake too. So I think that's something to be aware of, that you're going to continue to see that, and we see a lot of that down in the southeastern part of the corner of the state, but it's up here too, and so be very careful with that as well. Next, I'm going to go to Tim Cowman, who's with our he's with our Department of Ag and Natural Resources. He's going to speak a little bit about some of his experience on this whole event and how it played out and some of the geology behind it as well.
Thank you, Governor. I think the Governor put the magnitude of this event into a good perspective. You can see how large it actually was. It actually encompassed 5 rivers and a main stem reservoir on the Missouri River. And all of these parts were moving parts that made it very difficult to assess what was going to happen from day to day. But the good news is all of those rivers have now peaked. They're all starting to decline, albeit slowly. But that means that the water levels in essentially every area that's been impacted are receding. I'll speak to the James River first, since it's closest to us here. The James River was the last one to peak. It peaked at about 1 a.m. this morning. But those levels are beginning to decline, and the gauge where we measured the flows is actually about 7 miles north of Highway 50 here up on the Johnson Bridge. So it takes a while for those peak flows to move through this area and hit the Missouri River. But we should be seeing that by now if they haven't already started moving through. So if the water levels aren't declining yet in the immediate vicinity of southern Yankton County, I would expect that they will be declining within the next few hours. You know, that the whole thing here is all of these rivers are putting a large pulse essentially into the Vermilion River or into the Missouri River, but they're doing their own damage as that pulse moves down each respective river as well. So that's what made this such a large event, with so many people being impacted. The Corps, fortunately didn't have to raise water level discharge out of the Gavins Point Dam, but they weren't really able to drop it as low as we would have liked it, because they had to balance that with what was coming into Lewis and Clark Lake through the Niobrara River. And the levels I've seen now, I know the Niobrara is receding. I know that Lewis and Clark Lake is dropping. So that's all good, that we can rest assured that we're not going to see increased flows out of Gavins Point Dam. These pulses that the James and the Vermilion are putting in are creating, sort of a synergistic effect when we get further downstream, because you got all those pulses coming together with the flows on the Missouri River and creating big problems for just downstream of here. But with the Big Sioux is finally starting to drop at a fairly good pace, which means the Missouri River down there is also dropping. The pulse from the Vermilion River is actually hitting that area now, but the levels have dropped enough that we don't even expect the Missouri to rise any more than it is right now as that Vermilion River pulse moves through. This pulse from the James River will probably hit that area down there by North Sioux City sometime tomorrow. But again, the water levels will have dropped enough in the Missouri River that we don't expect any type of rise. The only thing that the River Forecast Center is saying is that the rate of decline in the Missouri River may level out a little bit while that pulse moves through, but we won't see any increase in those levels, and that's good. Both the governor and Secretary Perry alluded to these receding waters and the fact that they can still be dangerous, and that's a good point. We have a lot of water sitting out there in basically agricultural land, because this was a huge volume event where we had these huge rains that went all the way basically from the Niobrara Basin in Nebraska up by Mitchell and over to Sioux Falls and dropped huge amounts of rain. So all three of these rivers have put a lot of water into storage out into agricultural areas, and it's slowly working its way back in, which is why they're probably not receding as much as quickly as you thought they might. I mean, this is not like a sharp V type of graph to the rise and fall. This is really spread out over several days because there's so much water that's coming back into these rivers. So what that means is that those flood waters that moved out onto the floodplain and can be deep in spots and full of dangerous things, they're going to be out there a while. So everyone needs to be aware of that as well. Thank you.
Yes, and I want to remind everybody that if you have personal loss, you should be working with your county emergency director to file that loss and be accumulating that. They'll be doing that on the public side, public infrastructure as well, to see if we can qualify for FEMA relief. Also, we've got a lot of farmers and ranchers out there that have had incredible damage to their land and acreage and crop. I would encourage them to also go out there and to contact their farm service agency, the FSA office, or their crop insurance agent as well. And then if you have personal property loss in your home, make sure you reach out to your insurance agent as well and be doing that. I think most people know that, but it's always good to say that that's the appropriate place to be going in the meantime while you're collecting and gathering and cleaning up from the flooding that we have seen in some of these homes. So with that, let's open it up to any questions that people may have.
Governor, what's the highest concern right now? What area or areas are the highest concern?
Right now, for me, it's we got the interstate back open, but the Mook Lake area, the North Shore Drive, that is a very dangerous situation. We have whole homes that have fallen into the lake. We've got 100-foot drop-offs from wash-offs. We've got live power lines that are laying across the roads. We've got boats stuck in trees. We've got trees that are uprooted and half falling over, and people are wanting to get back into their homes, and they're not listening to us. They're not staying out of the area. So we're going to have to take some action there. I know people want to go back into their homes and get their things, but that lake is very dangerous. It's filled with debris. The roads are washed out in several places on the way there, and it's not just a washout, it's a 50-foot drop-off. So we're going to have to encourage them and schedule a time they can go get their things out of their homes. But that area is the most dangerous area right now because of the damage that's been done. And those families want their things, and I understand that. But we're gonna send extra resources there to keep them out because somebody's gonna get hurt. We got through this whole situation with one loss of life that happened. We don't wanna lose any more, and we certainly don't wanna lose any people from going into a dangerous area that we knew was dangerous. So I think that down there, the Union County folks are tired, and it's been contentious, and it's been hard, a situation for them, and they're asking for more resources to keep that area secure. It's not going to be safe for several days. But for us, as far as the water goes, the water situation goes, is, for me, now people have been doing this for a few days. Any county road or state highway, if there's water, don't drive through it. If there's a barricade, don't drive around it. You don't know what's underneath it. It could be a 20-foot washout and put yourself in a dangerous situation. We're still doing rescues of people who are driving around barricades that shouldn't be. Other questions? Yes.
Yesterday, the city of Vermillion announced they were having issues with their wastewater treatment because 2 of the 3 outports where the firm was weren't working over the river. Is there any update on that at all?
Yeah, a couple days ago, they weren't sure what happened there. They just knew there was sewage going up and not getting to the the treatment plant. They have found what the issue is. There were 2 lines I think they were able to fix already, and they're working on the 3rd. That was the last update I had. It's been a while, but the system's getting back online.
Other questions?
Governor, speaking of Mook Lake, the berm that was put on the interstate, there's been a lot of talk about that direct all the water to Mook Lake as opposed to somewhere else. Can you kind of go through the logistics of
Yeah.
how and why that ended up there?
Yeah, so the emergency operations plan that the North Sioux City has in place, it's been in place for over 30 years, that in this type of a situation, that they would utilize their levee system. So the city council had a meeting and had a vote to operationalize their emergency plan that they'd had in place, and that included building up their levees up to the interstate and us building a levee across the interstate to do that. So we did that in 2014 as well, but the water never got high enough that it reached the levee. And they had mitigated before, moving a few houses on North Shore Drive to where water could flow through there without damaging property. The problem was is that this water came through so hard and so fast that it just took out, gosh, there's a lot of homes. I mean, we're a couple dozen at least homes that are just gone. So that mitigation plan would have worked in a lesser event, but there was so much water that flowed through there. So those people are in a really, really all of North Sioux City was saved, and the industrial park was saved, and that what they did is, the emergency management director there, he put in plan the place that had been there for years in this type of an emergency situation. He operationalized it based on the city council's vote, and that's why it was put up. So, there's some communities in the state that we've been in and that I visited that they didn't have an emergency operations plan, and so now their town is yelling at them. Because why didn't you have an emergency operations plan? Why weren't you prepared? And North Sioux City was prepared, and people are still upset and angry. So I think everybody needs to remember that when you have a mitigation plan, that doesn't mean there's not going to be any damage. It means you're going to try to make decisions to have as least amount of damage as possible and do the best you can to protect as many people as possible. And I think North Sioux City did the best they could to make the right decision, but the folks on North Shore Drive on Mook Lake, are the ones that are suffering because their homes are gone.
This might be more of a question for Paul, but I know there's that meeting tomorrow morning, but what's the next step here in Yankton County?
Once we get the disaster declaration, it'll be getting all the information from the townships and the county and any organization, like an REA that has damages. We need to collect that information and get it to the state within that 30-day period. Because if we don't make it that way, then we don't qualify for it. So that's our next steps, is to start gathering all the information.
And that's another part of the hard part of these types of situations. You have the crisis that goes on for a period of time or a number of days, but then for that 30 days is when Paul's job really, gets busy, because he's going to have to hear from all these townships and collect all the data for his county, get it into us at the Office of Emergency Management so we can submit that documentation in to qualify for those FEMA dollars and those dollars of relief. And then the state steps up and does their part as well, and then the local community and the county knows what they're responsible for as well. Yeah.
I have one more thing, and I kind of forgot about it. We talked about the Emergency Operations Center that was set up. You know, I've got a bunch of folks sitting on the wall on the other side over there. It isn't just me. I won't mention their names, because one of them I'll probably get beat up on, but they're the ones, they're the backbone behind it. It isn't just me. We've got 5 other people sitting next door making the IAPs, getting the weather stuff, putting together PA stuff. So I gotta give the big hands out to them also. Otherwise, I probably shouldn't go back to that side of the room.
The one thing, Jerry, you asked a little bit about Mook Lake, and I do want to have Tim come back up and talk a little bit about the fact that Mook Lake would have flooded anyways, and the water came in exactly where we thought it was going to come in, but why it was a little bit of a different situation than what they had planned on.
When the flood of 2014 happened down through that area on the Big Sioux and Missouri, after that flood, as a way to be better prepared for future floods, we had a hydrologic model built of essentially that river and the Missouri River so that we could predict what was going to happen in future floods. When the 2019 flood went through there, which was also pretty major, that model was spot on with its predictions. So that model was used in this flood as well. And as we're seeing now what the result of that flood was, how high it was, how far it spread out, we can see that the model again was spot on with this flood. So in that model, when we look at the flooding in the Mook Lake area with or without the berm, we find essentially no difference. In other words, it doesn't matter if the berm was there or not, that water would have gone over into the Mook Lake area and flooded it. So the benefit here was that we also know from that model that if the berm was not there, like the governor said, that industrial park section of North Sioux City, as well as residential sections further south of the industrial park, they would have also seen a lot of water.
Yeah, we and we had that bomb cyclone that hit the state. Since 2019, we have been, as a state, investing heavily in repairing and rebuilding dams and levee systems. Sioux Falls did a lot of work building up levee systems and working to do that. That helped them incredibly through this situation, the Big Sioux going through there. And so I'm glad that with every single one of these floods, we have literally spent millions of dollars making sure that our dams are fixed, that our dams are rebuilt, and that they're to standard and that they will hold with this kind of pressure, and that our levee systems are raised to the levels that we think that we need them to be. So that's been good, and that helped us a lot in this. I know that we were better prepared for this situation than our surrounding states. They have a lot more damage because of not having that kind of an investment, so this was helpful to do that. But you know, we always do see some loss, and that's always a hard thing to get through. But I'll tell you, throughout this situation, talking to the Army Corps of Engineers and them giving me predictions, and then the National Weather Service giving us predictions, and then I would call Tim. Tim was always right. So I would, the National Weather Service, I mean, I gotta love them because they're there and they're a resource. But if I had to pick one that I was gonna listen to, it's gonna be Tim and his model. And he always gave me the most accurate information, and what they built in that system was the most predictable thing for us to use, and I was extremely grateful for it, because there was times I was getting information from the Army Corps and from the National Weather Service that just an hour later would be 5 feet off and cresting 12 hours earlier than they told me a half hour before, and that's pretty hard to plan and prepare and get people ready for and keep them calm and ready to go to work. So his models are fantastic, and I think that was a great resource for us to build into, to have. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't think the National Guard has been deployed yet.
Nope.
Is there a threshold when they might be coming in for cleanup or something? Or?
Well, in order for the National Guard to be activated, the county has to request it, and then I make a decision if it's warranted, and if we should do that. We have not had to utilize the National Guard for this operation yet. That's usually typically a very crisis situation, and the National Guard is extremely expensive. So if you do activate the National Guard, then the local county has to pay for that response. and they tend to be more expensive than using other resources or contractors or things like that. So that has not been necessary up until this point, and I don't expect that we'll have to. And I gotta tell you, we activate our National Guard, I mean, they get utilized a lot. If they've been deployed federally overseas a lot and throughout lots of situations, you know, we have to be wise with how we use our soldiers. And this was a situation where every community was pretty well prepared, and that wasn't necessary to activate them at this point. All right, well, thank you very much.